In this video, I would like to do a summary of what Christ taught himself concerning the signs of his return, of his second coming. And there are many passages that one could go to in talking about eschatology. But I want to focus on this one. You could go to Ezekiel, talking about how Israel would be brought back to her land. You could talk about Daniel and the 70 weeks of Daniel. And a lot of people have done that, a lot of evangelicals. What I would like to do is go to one passage and focus on it, and namely the passage where Jesus himself talks about the signs of his return. So as we begin this text, notice it reads, Jesus came out from the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out the temple buildings to him. And as this was happening, notice he said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which shall not be torn down." And then when he said that, he was sitting on the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" And Jesus answered and said to them, now he begins to spell out the signs that would happen before his coming. Many are saying today, are we living on the verge of that? And we could well be. No one knows the time or the hour when Christ returns. He taught that. So it's wrong to try to predict the time. I remember when I was years ago in the pastorate, someone in our church said he's going to come in 1992. And he was so convinced of that. But of course, it never happened. So we need to be careful about setting a date. However, there are certain signs that Jesus himself talks about. So like I said, I think I am personally starting here to discuss this. There's much study that's been done, as I said, in Ezekiel, in Daniel, in Jeremiah, and Isaiah, like Israel being brought back to her land, Gog and Magog, on and on from Ezekiel. But here, Jesus sets forth what we might call them several things that he believes and taught would precede his coming. So they said to him, what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And Jesus answered and said to them, see to it that no one misleads you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. And of course, that's been happening since the first century, and it's still happening today. There are many who will say, I am the Christ, follow me. I am the one that will be the Messiah. And basically, there are many false teachers throughout the time, from the teaching of Jesus at this point to today, who have claimed to be the Messiah, who have claimed to be the Christ. Furthermore, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened, for those things must take place. But that is not the end yet. And as we look at history, from the time of Jesus, there have been wars and rumors of wars. And furthermore, he goes on to list that again with other signs. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And certainly that has taken place since the first century and continues to take place today, and has been an ongoing, can I say, sign. Furthermore, in various places there will be famines and earthquakes, and certainly we see that through time from Christ up to now, and we're seeing it today, famines and earthquakes. We hear of that all the time. Things that are happening in the world. Furthermore, but all these are merely the beginnings of birth pangs. This is just the beginning of it all. The birth pangs are announcing the final climax when Christ finally sets up his kingdom, and what precedes it would be like birth pangs, waiting for a new birth, the birth of Christ's final kingdom. But these are just the beginnings, he said. Then they will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. Certainly, persecution has been a part of believers since the first century and continues today. Constantly, believers are persecuted, hated by all nations because of Christ. If you name Christ, it can produce a tremendous divide or a hatred. At that time, many will fall away and will betray one another and hate one another. There'll be a falling away through time, Jesus is saying, and it will intensify. I'm hearing more and more people saying, I once was a pastor, and now I don't believe anything. That's becoming quite common that you hear. Many false prophets will rise and will mislead many. And that certainly has happened through time and continues today. Notice he goes on, because lawlessness is increased, most people's love will grow cold. We're seeing a coldness in love for Christ, but also love for humanity, love for one another. We live and have lived through time in coldness, people's love growing cold. And it continues. Many of these things continue to intensify. But the one who endures to the end, he will be saved. The one who is faithful and is faithful to the end will be delivered or will be saved. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. And certainly through time, the good news of Christ has been preached, and it continues to be preached to all people, to all nations. Now with the internet, it literally goes everywhere. But he goes on to talk about the time of the abomination of desolation. And there's a lot of different interpretations relative to that. So far, what we've read is repeated in the seals of Revelation. These very same things are repeated by the Apostle John, St. John. But notice, perilous times, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Whoever is on the housetop must not go down to get the things out that are in the house. Whoever is in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days, because it's going to be hard to make a quick escape. But pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, because people did not want to go very far on the Sabbath. They would not travel. For then there will be a great tribulation, such has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will be. Again, some take a double fulfillment here. 70 AD, what happened when the Romans invaded uh, Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, and others believe it's a double fulfillment. That could be one level, but that's not the end. Looking at a final great period of tribulation, a double fulfillment, which is quite common in biblical study, a type followed by another application. Unless these days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. In other words, it's not going to go on forever. This time of trial and tribulation. Then if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him. For false Christ and false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders, so to mislead, if possible, even the elect. If people are saying, here is Christ, don't believe them, Jesus is saying. Behold, I have told you in advance. So if they say, behold, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. Or behold, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe them. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. It'll be sudden, but it'll be visible worldwide, I think he's saying. I take this not to be a secret kind of a rapture, but it'll be like looking at lightning that everyone can see. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will be gathered. In other words, it'll be visible. Just like when you see vultures gathered, you know there's a corpse there. Jesus is saying, when I come, it'll be a very, very visible coming. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens be shaken. An eclipse became a symbolic understanding of a change, and this is another picture of that. And following this, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And I think the mourning is because they know that there's a judgment coming. They'll see the Son of Man coming. Son of Man, a title that Jesus used of himself as the Messiah. And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. In other words, the angels will become the reapers, so to speak, gather together the elect, those who have put their faith in Christ, from one end of heaven to the other. This is called, we could say, the great gathering together when the Lord returns. So as we're looking at the teaching of Jesus, we could parallel this with 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 1 Thessalonians 1. Many have called this the rapture. It's looking at a final gathering together of all believers to meet the Lord as a welcoming party when he comes. And so he concludes this section by saying, now learn the parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So, too, when you see these things, recognize he is near, right at the door. And that's been with us for some time, but it's becoming, many feel, more intense, what Christ has been speaking of. Truly I say to you, This generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not. In other words, the generation even living at that time would have witnessed the destruction under Titus of the temple. But that generation can become a type of peoples living through time, and it will not pass away until my words are fulfilled. But of that day and hour no one knows. Christ wants to drive that home. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like in the days of Noah. Whereas in the days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then there will be two men in the field. One will be taken, and one will be left. One will be taken into judgment, I think, and one will be left. Two women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, and one will be left. Just like the flood came and took Noah and his family away. Some apply that to be taken away to salvation in meeting the Lord, and one would be left to face the judgment. And that's possible. Notice it says, and they did not understand until the flood came. They were marrying and giving in marriage. Then all of a sudden, the coming of the Son of Man will be, there will be two men. One will be taken and the other left. And the being taken here could mean taken to meet the Lord, and one left for judgment, just like certain were taken into the ark and others were left for judgment. And maybe that's the context here. Uh, but we don't know when that's going to happen, Jesus is saying. So what he says is, be ready. Therefore, be on the alert, for you do not know which day our Lord is coming. And that's been through time. We're always supposed to be ready. We can't predict when, but we need to be prepared. And we prepare by occupying. Notice, but be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what time the night the thief was coming, he would have been on the alert and would have not allowed his house to be broken into. For this reason, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour when you think not. In other words, when you think he will, or when you do not think he will. In other words, we're to be ready because we don't know the time. And I think being ready is being occupied until he comes. He goes on in 45 to drive that home. Who then is the faithful and sensible slave whom his master put in charge of his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master finds so doing. In other words, he's doing what he was called to do. Truly I say to you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that evil slave says in his heart, my master is not coming for a long time, and he begins to beat his fellow slaves and to eat and drink with drunkards, the master of that slave will come on the day when he does not expect him, and in an hour which he does not know, and he will cut him in pieces and assign him a portion with the hypocrites. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So what Jesus is simply teaching, I take it, is be ready. And how do we prepare? By occupying, by doing what he has called us to do. And everybody is called to share Christ and to be involved in what he is about, but everybody has a different gift. Some are teachers, some are evangelists, some have other gifts of administration, but we're to be doing what he has called each of us to do. And the bottom line, excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. The bottom line, excuse me, the bottom line is to be ready. I didn't know when that sneeze would happen, so I wasn't ready for it. But the bottom line is we need to be ready. And how do we be ready? The only thing we can do is just do what we're called to do. If you're a teacher, teach. If you're an evangelist, evangelize. If you have the gift of helps, use the gift of helps. If you're an administrator, do that. Whatever it is, use your gifts. Occupy. Share the good news of Christ. Help people to grow in Him, teaching them to observe what He has commanded. That's the way we prepare. We don't know the time He's coming, but I think these are the different signs that point to His coming. And as we look at church history, they've been with us since the first century, but certainly they seem to have intensified as we look at life and as we're living today. Now, maybe some will say, well, it's always been that way, Gary. Maybe so. But it seems like we're seeing more of an intensification of what Jesus spoke of. So the main message is keep on keeping on, serve the Lord, redeem the time, and in the day that we think not, the Lord is going to come. And it may be in our lifetime, it may not be. I pray that it would be, but we're to be ready, and we're ready by occupying.